Hey, Michael J.
How's it going this week?
Fantastic. I'm excited. At the time of this of our recording, I'm right about to fly to Seattle tomorrow morning for PAX. So by the time this is up, the Magic Worlds will be going on, PAX will be going on. It's just exciting, a good week. But we're just coming fresh off of a heck of a weekend of Magic, right? Like 3 big Modern Grand Prix.
Yeah, was it like Modern Day or Modern Weekend or something? Because it was all Modern Grand Prix at the same time.
Yep, and for the second time this year. Because they did one of these Modern Grand Prix weekends earlier this year when the Eldrazi completely took over. And this weekend, definitely an extremely varied, like a highly diverse bunch of decks and strategies. But the Eldrazi were definitely still showing up.
So I have an interesting, I don't know, maybe it depends what you think of as interesting take on this. Brendan Hurst on Twitter tweeted at me and he said, "Hey, it's going to be pretty tough to think that Naya Burn is going to continue to be under the radar after this past weekend." And I didn't know what he was talking about at the time, actually, because I am currently away on vacation. So I looked it up, and in fact, Naya Burn had a finals appearance in one of the Grand Prix, and then won the Indianapolis Grand Prix.
Yeah, in the hands of Sandy Dog himself, Brandon Burton. It's a little bit of a variation on the Lava Spike deck that's a slightly more Zooey while still being very, very Lava Spike deck oriented. It's basically just take the Lava Spike deck and add green for Wild Nacatl and Atarka's Command, and white for Boros Charm, and to make your Wild Nacatls a 3/3 instead of a 2/2.
Yeah, I think this deck is like, I think, pretty reasonably established version of Naya Burn for Modern. I think it's still the Lava Spike deck. The deck basically says it won't play as many Grim Lavamancers. It doesn't play Lightning Helix main deck. Burton shaves like a Rift Bolt, and then
but I don't know, man. When you have 17 creatures that are all just like legit creatures, like none of these are Ball Lightnings. 17 creatures. I think it's just a Zoo deck, man. Right. Like, it's definitely not just a Zoo deck. It literally has 4 Lava Spikes, so certainly you're making some concessions here. But, like, this deck is like you interact with it with removal spells, and it is it's only got 23 burn spells. That's, like, pretty low for one of these decks, and 4 of them are conditional upon there being a creature in play.
So if you set aside the mana base for a second, because this does have a separate mana base, I would just say, you think, and I don't mean this in any kind of a negative way, I'm just saying, look, I just want to bring this up. I think it's an interesting thing to discuss. He has 1 Grim Lavamancer, 1 Rift Bolt, and 2...
No, 3 Rift Bolts.
No. 1 Rift Bolt, 1 Grim Lavamancer, and 2 Lightning Helix is different from my main deck, in exchange for 4 Wild Nacatl. You think that moves him from, if we're going to talk about this from a next level deck building perspective, from Lava Spike deck to red aggro this one is like a true hybrid, right? Like the deck that you were describing, it's definitely among Lava Spike decks, starting to flirt with being a red aggro deck, but it's still much, much more Lava Spike deck than red aggro. To me, the 4 Wild Nacatls is enough to push it over the edge where it's on the very, very, very edge of red aggro. To me, this is like right on the line, and I think that it's best viewed from the lens of both a Lava Spike deck and a red aggro deck. So that actually reminds me of something. I want to say, might have been 2008. Adam Prozac and Louis Scott Vargas actually worked on a deck, and it started off very, very Lava Spike deck. It was an extended deck, and then they're like, well, some of these cards are just better than others, right? You know, if you start playing Curd Apes, it's like a renewable source of burn. And what was the guy? Keldon Marauders? Is he the guy?
Keldon Marauder.
It's a creature that's kind of a burn spell. And I think that one of the things that kind of differentiates these decks, like I said, this deck is very, very similar to the deck that I played 3 weeks ago. Just four main deck cards off. Is that it is the case that creature removal is way, way, way better against this deck. And this deck also, on the spectrum, is much worse at closing out games, right? Especially against more control. In Modern, what a control opponent constitutes is, you could be pretty shaky about what that means. But it's much worse.
I think you can't describe a deck that is different by 4 cards where none of the individual cards matter that much as being much worse.
Well, it doesn't exist. Yes. You can't rip a Lightning Helix and finish off somebody who's locked down the ground. If you rip a wild Nacatl when the game is slipped away from, when you can no longer make any progress with creatures, and you rip a wild Nacatl instead of a Lightning Helix, you lose that game. But when the trade-off is, of course, that the hope is that there's a higher percentage of games where when you rip a Lava Spike, it kills them instead of being a Lava Spike short because you drew those wild Nacatls early on. Yeah. And the wild Nacatl is, it's a Lava Spike every turn for the first couple of turns of the game. I would make the argument, I think you probably agree with this, and maybe you won't, you'll tell me in about 30 seconds, that jury's out. It's unclear if the wild Nacatls are better or worse quality cards in this archetype in Modern.
I think that not only is the jury out, it's not going to be resolved anytime soon because it's going to go back and forth. It's a contextual thing based on the needs of the format. So I think it's the case that when Lightning Bolt is out of favor, wild Nacatl gets better. And when people are playing stuff like Eldrazi decks, wild Nacatl gets better. And when people are playing a lot of when you're playing a mid-range sort of strategy, the wild Nacatls start getting worse. And so it's an interesting gamble to lean into everybody compensating for the popularity of Jund. And I think it's actually really, really smart for this weekend. It was very smart to be playing wild Nacatls at a time to sort of anticipate that a lot of the things that were good before, the amount of Grim Flare and Tarmogoyf stuff, like when everybody shifts against that and they're playing more Terminates and not Terminates, I'm sorry, when they're playing when everybody's playing strategies that are effective against Jund, like Fast Combo or Eldrazi, then wild Nacatl gets a lot more appealing.
So I will tell you what I really respected a lot about Burton's sideboard, though. Man, Core Firewalker, that guy. He came with guns to a knife fight, I think is the appropriate way of looking at this.
Yeah, I think that Brandon also correctly anticipated that the format was going to have a lot of burn, a lot of Suicide Zoo. There's just like a ridiculous amount of direct damage and the like going on, and having Core Firewalker along with Lightning Helix and Deflecting Palm in his sideboard. I like it. I mean, I think Core Firewalker is just like one of the just absolute stone cold killers of Modern right now, and it's not the easiest thing to cast. No question. I mean, he's got Copperstone Gorge, Mountain, Stomping Ground, but he's got 14 sources. How many more can you really ask for in a deck with 20 land?
I mean, this is a combo deck now, though, right? Like, can I assemble WW and one of my 3 copies inside of the reasonable window?
The thing is, well, I don't know, because 14 land to produce WW, you're still in really good shape to get that. You're a pretty big favorite to be able to do that relatively early on. It's not like that's like, I mean, if you think about it, like 14 sources of WW is not the end of the world for being able to cast like a Wrath of God type effect, right? And it's not, I mean, obviously trying to get it a little earlier is a little tougher. But even if you drop a core Firewalker on turn 3 or 4, that is just a really, really big game in the mirror.
Tough, yeah. I wonder,
or in the semi-mirror.
I wonder in the, let's call it, the semi-mirror. I'm telling you this, I will at least try this out, but I think I'm likely to adopt core Firewalker myself for the sideboard, because I think, like, if this is getting popular, then you gotta upgrade your defenses for the mirror at some point. That's something that, especially if this becomes stock, right? Like, what if you just, like, step away and you're like, all right, this wasn't that popular before. Now Naya Burn's going to be more popular. In fact, people are going to play Nacatl, Naya Burn. How does that change your decisions? It's like, Nacatl, Naya Burn. I still think I'm still pretty comfortable playing a kind of deck like this. I understand how to play the mirrors, etc. But if people start playing with core Firewalkers themselves, because Burton's deck is, I think, like, this is the paper of record now for Naya Burn players, at least for the immediate future. If this is the tech that people have now, and you don't have that tech, you're a step behind, at least for the mirror. I think that you're at a dramatic disadvantage in the mirror, right? If everybody else in the room has got core Firewalker in their sideboard. Because my first reaction was, well, what am I going to do here? Either you have to race the core Firewalkers, which is tough, right? That they're built to be tough to race, or you have to draw your Path to Exile to deal with it. And I only had 2. That's also a tough thing. Burton played 4. I think that his sideboard's really interesting to me. I think he did a great job of identifying which decks were going to do well, and therefore which sideboard cards he should come packing. But, like, he just does not care. The downside of the Path to Exiles in Modern right now, not a lot of downside, I think. You were talking about the Suicide Zoo, the Death Shadow deck. Does it even have a basic land in it? Just doesn't matter, right?
No, I mean, it doesn't matter. It's just like, what are they? I mean, their deck is almost all cards that, like, the Death Shadow deck that Thomas Hendricks came in second with over across the ocean. His deck has almost no cards that cost any mana. I mean, like it's literally Death Shadow costs 1, Swift Spear 1, Step Links 1, Street Race 0, Tarmogoyf. He has a single Tarmogoyf that costs 2. Then Wild Nacatl 1, Mishra's Bauble 0, Become Immense 1, Lightning Bolt 1, Mutagenic Growth 0. And then he has these 4-teamer Battle Rages that cost 2, and then 4 Gitaxian Probes cost 0, and Thoughtseize that cost 1. Like, the average converted mana cost of his deck is, a fair bit, like quite a bit below 1. And he has only 5 cards in the whole deck that cost more than 1. Like, an extra land is not doing anything. And they certainly... And that's if they even played one. I mean, Thomas Hendricks doesn't even play one. He's got one in his sideboard, and he'll probably board it in here just because he's gonna, against Sandy Dog, he would bring in Hooting Mandrills and Tarmogoyf. But even if he gets his one forest from his Path to Exile, it's not like he's even doing anything. That's something. Like, it all adds up. It all matters. The biggest thing about it, though, is that it makes it so that he doesn't have to play a Godless Shrine untapped or something,
Oh, yeah, just to keep pace. It just helps him to just
exactly
life total. So, actually, you mentioned the Hooting Mandrills and the Tarmogoyf. I am least comfortable when I'm playing against these kind of decks when they bring in, like, all the Tarmogoyfs and the Hooting Mandrills. That's obviously their plan against fast, aggressive decks that are putting pressure on their life total. Can you walk the listeners through a little bit how that would work? These two cards are so in opposition to each other, even though they do the same thing, right?
Yeah, absolutely. The one thing I did want to note, though, on the Naya Burn deck before we slid off it was just the it's probably bad, but there's a part of me that wonders if the metagame would ever be at a spot where you might want 1 plains, either in the deck or sideboard for. Yeah. So here's the thing. Right now, you got 14 sources of white. Just imagine if you had 4 Path to if you have Path to Exile, Path to Exile. And maybe you just don't want it in the mirror. It's just too bad. That's possible.
You might want it if these Firewalkers becomes state.
And that's the thing. That's the thing I wonder is if you have Path to Exile to be able to path your opponent's core Firewalker, or Path to Exile to be able to path your own creature, whether it's in response to a burn spell or just to path your own guy to get your second white for core Firewalker. I don't know. I mean, maybe it's too cute. It's probably too cute when you're trying to support Searing Blaze in your 20 land deck. But I don't know. I think about it. Anyway, Death Shadow. The thing about boarding in Hooting Mandrills and Tarmogoyf is that it's a bunch of creatures that can't get killed by burn spells easily. And it's not that Burton's version of Naya Burn has very many removal spells. I mean, 4 Lightning Bolt, 4 Searing Blaze, and 3 Rift Bolt is not exactly a king's ransom. But I mean, like, the amount of damage they do per mana is quite high. And the Death Shadow deck, it doesn't need the creature to hit 5 times or anything. I mean, to begin with, the Naya Burn deck is typically going to be doing somewhere between 2 and 5 damage to itself. And then on top of that, the combination of Become Immense,
2 to 5 damage is a really, really low estimate. I think
that's just to operate.
Is the operating amount, especially if you have like all these green cards, right? Like, is he going to take out Wild Nacatl after sideboarding?
No,
and he's not.
Definitely not.
He's going to do 6 to himself. I think.
Maybe. The thing is that there's still Copperline Gorge. There's still Mountain and there's fetching basics. Not basic, but fetching a tap duel. I think 6 is not the worst estimate. That's true. And that's not even counting if he plays an Eidolon. But the point is that Hedrix is trying to stick a threat and then connect with the threat often just a single time. Because if you put down a Tarmogoyf, it's very easy for the Tarmogoyfs in this deck to start off as like a 4 or 5 base. And if you not even counting Become Immense, if you just Mutagenic Growth and Teamer Battle Rage, you're already talking about 14 damage. Right? Like, that's 14 right there. Because of Mishra's Bauble, Gataxian Probe, Fetch Lands, Street Wraith, just the sheer volume of ways that this deck, and Mutagenic Growth itself, of course, this is a deck that can very easily kill in a single hit from a Tarmogoyf. And Step Links is just so much worse for being able to support that plan. Now, it's still a totally reasonable option, but I think part of it is that this is a deck that wants to move away from things like Thoughtseize and Gataxian Probe to some degree. Now, you want a diverse mix of options, but the last thing this deck wants to do is just, stack up the self damage. Like Street Wraith at the very least. You're not trying to cycle a Street Wraith against a Lava Spike deck. You're doing their job for them.
Yeah, I think that the Suicide Zoo against Naya Burn matchup it's such an interesting chess match. Miles, who we talked about last week in the top 8 of the Invitational, played against Brad Nelson, who was playing Suicide Zoo, and he was just saying, like, I mean, obviously Brad is a master, but he's just like, the texture of Brad's games was different depending on if he was on the play or the draw. Like, he would either aggressively get his lands into play untapped, right, or play the entire game getting his lands into play tapped and then bide his time, and then those are just he's like he was playing 2 different decks depending on if he was going first or second. Now, I thought that was a really interesting observation. Separately, I'm really just in awe of this Suicide Zoo deck. I think it's one of the most elegantly built decks I've ever seen.
Well, I love some of the little details are just so smart. Like the 2 Inquisitions, a Kozilek, and the Pyroclasm in the sideboard. One of the things I love so much about this is that it's not clear that the 1 Pyroclasm is actually better in the abstract than the 3rd Path Exile. But the nice thing is that you want to board in a critical mass of sorceries so that when you're playing against like a Lava Spike deck, you can take out all your you can move away from Gataxian Probe and Thoughtseize, but still have a sorcery to power up your Tarmogoyf. And the 2 Inquisition and the Kozileks, it's like, well, I wanted 2 more discard spells anyway. I would like the 2 extra ones to be things that don't do damage so that you can board those in against Lava Spikes and still be able to hit the Path to Exile out of their hand. But the the Pyroclasm is a similar thing where it's like, okay, well, I wanted X number of removal spells, and instead of just 3 paths, by playing 2 paths and 1 Pyroclasm, you actually still get that extra amount of sorcery. And there's just little things. Like, for instance, I love the 2 Hooting Mandrills. A lot of players would be tempted to use Tassiger or Gurmag Angler just because they're better cards, but it's not like you're ever going to activate Tassiger's ability. And so it's like, well, you can off of like Overgrown Tomb and Stomping Ground, but you're not really it's not going to go that way. And that's not what this deck is about. I mean, this deck has 17 land, and it's not trying to grind anybody out. That's not what's going on. And the extra point of toughness is just not as important as Trample. And the same is true with Gurmag Angler. The +1/+1 is just not as important as Trample, to say nothing of it costing 1 extra mana. See, when you have Become Immense and Mutagenic Growth in your deck, Trample is a big deal. A big, big deal.
Oh, it's a huge deal.
Faith Shield, another real cool card. Faith Shield has the much maligned Finest Hour or Fateful Hour mechanic, where if you have 5 or less life, it does extra, and that's obviously going to trigger more often when you're playing a Death Shadow deck.
You have 5 or less life every time. Right,
exactly. So it's kind of it's funny because it's like for 1 mana you can actually just protect your Death Shadow from or whatever from a Path to Exile, but for 1 mana later it's actually quite easy to make your entire team unblockable. Because often all their creatures are red or whatever. If you're playing against elves, all their creatures are green. Whatever it is, having the kicker be a very real thing. It's cool. It's a nice little touch.
Yeah, I think this deck's super cool. So you said earlier that a lot of these deck choices that were made, I think, across many of these Grand Prix for Modern were because of the popularity of Jund, right? Is that?
Yeah, the success of Jund from 2 weeks ago. Jund was fairly successful 2 weeks ago, and people have been very much responding to that.
So I think that there are a bunch of different variations of Jund that came out, especially in Europe, that are worth talking about. But I just make a quick observation about Naya. In my experience playing Naya Burn, which is the more of the Lava Spike version, I'm not worried at all about playing against decks like Jund or Abzan. Like those decks, I feel like I'm very, very comfortable playing against. But I think that when you start playing Wild Nacatl, you tell me how you look at this. It seems to me like I want to play on their vector now, right? Which is like I'm going to play a high quality creature, but you can never compete with them on the vector of high quality creatures, right? Like they've got all kinds of Tarmogoyfs or Siege Rhinos or Grim Flayers that are way better than your guys. That when you want to fight with these guys with a Naya Burn deck, you want to fight a non-interactive fight. But you said that you think that the Wild Nacatl was actually a great move. Is that what's going on there?
Yeah, the reason I think the Wild Nacatl is a great move is because I think enough people were going to slant their strategies against Jund so that Jund would be less successful this weekend. And the same with Abzan. Any of those sort of mid-rangey decks, because mid-range had such a good showing 2 weeks ago, I thought that people were going to be shifting, playing a little bit more Infect, playing a little bit more Eldrazi, playing a little bit more just moving away from the sort of I think that the people playing Jund and Abzan were going to get hit a little harder this weekend because I don't think that Jund and Abzan are so strong that they can stand up to being the target.
Yeah, my take on Jund and Abzan are if you're really good at predicting what your opponents are, these decks are awesome because you can pick exactly what reactive cards are going to be the correct time, the correct level of efficiency to be maximally good against certain opponents. But if you're playing against 14 different archetypes, these decks are never optimized correctly to beat all 14.
Yeah, certainly not in Modern very often. That's not usually how you want to do it.
But I mean, you're just like, I'm going to play against Infect 10 times. You know which cards to play then, right? Like that's the way that it is.
So there's actually a little bit of extra technology over in Lim Zong Yi's deck that he finished third in the other Grand Prix. His Death Shadow aggro.
Guangzhou.
So he's got one Traverse the Ulvenwild in his sideboard. And it's actually kind of cute, right? Like, so not only does it give him an extra out to go find forest for things like Blood Moon or whatever, preemptively, but Traverse the Ulvenwild makes the one Tarmogoyf main deck have extra purpose. It also makes the Ranger of Eos that he has in the sideboard.
I was going to ask you, these guys are always in the deck together, I assume, right?
Yeah. So, well, I think that you could, I would assume that you're usually going to want to board them in together as part of a package. And it gives you an extra land to try to get up to the Ranger, but it also, more importantly, lets it be like there's functionally two Rangers. It's like there's a third Hooting Mandrill. It's like there's an extra an extra Tarmogoyf. And worst comes to worst, not worst comes to worst, but often the Traverse is going to do something of value, and sometimes you're going to just want to go get a Monastery Swift Spear since it has haste. But the Ranger of Eos is cool anyway because you've got both Death Shadow and Monastery Swift Spear, so you've got at least two different plans right there.
I think that Ranger of Eos is a card that I feel like should see more play in Modern and wider formats in general. I think card's really powerful. When
it's a 3/2 for 4. It's like a Mole Drifter with a bigger body for cheaper and selection.
Like really powerful selection. Like you're talking about getting Death Shadows, right? That's like the central theme of this deck. When there were Elves decks back in Extended, people were playing Ranger sometimes because they could get Heritage Druid and Nettle Sentinel, right? So they got a big chunk of the combo. But I just remember when Ranger of Eos, Bloodbraid Elf, and Baneslayer Angel were all legal in Standard at the same time, right? Well, these are three of the best cards in Standard. But generally speaking, people thought that Bloodbraid Elf was the best one of the three, right? I would guess that that's where you would land too, right? But I thought it was interesting that of the three, Baneslayer Angel was the first one to make a really big splash in bigger formats because it's the most expensive of the three, right? That was the one that Brian Kibler used to win the Pro Tour. And then it was Ranger of Eos. No one was playing Bloodbraid Elf, and then Bloodbraid Elf got banned. Right? That's basically the timeline. But you just think back a little bit. I don't think the Ranger of Eos is so much weaker than Bloodbraid Elf, right? I think they're very comparably powered. It's same size body. It lacks haste, but it actually has more card advantage, and sometimes you can get something really, really special with it, depending on your strategy. I think Death Shadow is just a wonderful, wonderful example here, where you're getting two huge creatures possibly for your mana there.
Yeah, I think the Ranger of Eos is still it's a perpetually underrated card. I don't think I would put it in the same league as Bloodbraid Elf because to me, it's like they're both 3/2s the draw card. The draw 2 cards actually. They're both 3/2s the draw 2 cards, but then also Bloodbraid Elf has haste, and also one of the 2 cards Bloodbraid Elf draws is a Black Lotus to cast the other one. I mean that's true. Black Lotus, don't get me wrong, the drawing a 1-drop of your choice, I think is slightly better. Nah, it's slightly worse. Because Bloodbraid Elf is giving you selection also, but I don't know. Either way, they're comparable. But I do think the Black Lotus is better than an extra 1-drop, and I think that haste is just great.
Well, it's actually sometimes better than Black Lotus, right? Back in the worst case scenario for Bloodbraid Elf, when it was at the height of its powers in Standard, it would typically cast a spell that was both black and red, which
Blightning,
like Blightning, yeah.
Which is 2 cards right there, just to
Yeah, so which Black Lotus couldn't do. But I think it depends, not to dwell on a card that hasn't been legal in any format for forever, but it depends on what your deck is. If you play one of these decks that's just designed to cascade and that every single card that Bloodbraid Elf can chain into is some sort of card advantage mechanism, then that's a different experience than a deck that can just turn over a Bird of Paradise, which is what often happened with Bloodbraid Elf, right?
Yeah, and I think that when Ranger of Eos can go get things like Death Shadow or Heritage Druid or Figure of Destiny, it's just a different experience than when it goes and gets Wild Nacatl or some kind of Kithkin or besides Figure of Destiny. But even still, if Ranger of Eos gets Wild Nacatl, that's 9 power for just 6 mana.
Yeah,
and you get to break it up into installments. So by turn 5, you've already put 9 power on the table across 3 bodies. That's like, it's the same amount of mana as Broodmate Dragon, but it comes down a turn, 2 turns. You get some of it 2 turns early, and the rest of it a turn early. And it's just so much more versatile because of the ability to have any amount of toolbox. You know, like the Naya mid-range deck that you designed that Coinbro won the World Championships with a few years back. That one you could do some cool stuff where, you know, often you're just banking on the go get wild Nacatl, so you just have 9 power across 3 bodies and can outgrind even a Jund deck. But I mean, sometimes you just, you know, sometimes you get Noble Hierarch.
Sometimes it was like you get Scoop Mob because that was just the finisher, right? You're like, oh, okay, you get this as the finisher. But sometimes you just get 2 Noble Hierarchs, right? Slam them down and attack with your Baneslayer Angel, which is now a 7/7, and they can't fight it with their Baneslayer Angel, which is only a 5/5. That's right. Like, which is like, you know, that's kind of an elegant thing that you're also a little bit gambling, right? Because if they deal with your Baneslayer Angel, now you've used your most powerful selection card to get to 2/01 creatures, but sometimes it was right. You want to jump over to Jund? I think there was a lot of interesting technology in Jund this past weekend that's probably worth mentioning.
Sure. So are you talking like Jiri Obraz?
So I'm actually looking at Grand Prix Lily, and I was just looking at a bunch of the different super standout players from years past and present, including Remy Fortier, Raph Levy, Jeremy Dezani. They just had some interesting things. So Remy Fortier. Was Remy Fortier Junk Rares? Was that the name of it? Cheap Rares?
Pro Tour. You're talking about Chase Rare?
Chase Rares. Sorry.
You know, I actually built that deck.
Yes, I know you built that deck. Yes, I know you built it. Why did I think it was Junk Rares? Chase Rares. So Remy Fortier.
Dude, I built whatever.
For the number of decks that you were.
No, the number of decks that are full of Junk Rares is too damn high.
Well, this one is not.
Remy's deck.
So Fortier's deck, I just thought this was interesting because I think this is the first of many, right? So I was having a conversation with Ozip Levitovich a few weeks ago about whether or not we should buy Liliana the Last Hope. And he says to me, I don't like buying Planeswalkers that are super expensive if they're not going to see play in wider formats. Because you're never going to see a time where this card is going to be played instead of Liliana the Veil. And I'm like, well, I already own 4 Liliana the Veil. Actually, I own more than 4. So that's cool, and I just moved on. But you know what? This is the first of many. Remy Fortier, 5 Lilianas at the 3 in his Jund deck, main deck. 1 Liliana the Last Hope, and I don't think this is the last time we're going to see Liliana the Last Hope in wider formats.
No, she started showing up at the SCG Opens already. You know, just like a few weeks back, as a one of occasionally. And I think you're right. I don't think this is the end we're going to see, you know, the last we're going to see of her. It's tough because she's obviously competing against herself. But Jund, there are times where Jund just wants more than 4 Lilianas anyway.
I mean, maybe not just Jund, but like, what about Abzan, right? Like, looping Siege Rhinos is a thing that you might want to do. That's a pretty powerful card.
It could be. The problem there, though, is that Abzan, even more so than Jund by a good margin, is so 3-rich. Like, you can only play so many 3s. And when your color combination gives you Lingering Souls, and there's Lingering Souls and Liliana of the Veil is right off top. That's like, how much room do you have for additional 3s? And we haven't even discussed Maelstrom Pulse, Knight of the Reliquary, Kitchen Finks. I mean, it's. I think it's reasonable, and you know, playing 1 Liliana is one extra Liliana, like playing a 5th Liliana. That is definitely not the same. Like, you don't have to play 4. You could just play 1 and play 5 Lilianas total, and you do get a little extra utility out of it because of Liliana's self-mill ability. Like, when you do use the regrowth part of her, like the get back the creature. The fact that the self-mill is so relevant, sometimes you flip a Lingering Souls.
That's why I thought in Abzan, right? So, especially if you're going Grimflayer.
You power up Grimflayer, you power up Lingering Souls, you power up Knight of the Reliquary, you power up Tarmogoyf, and the just having the extra selection matters because the number, I don't know how many regrowths that these people are going to make, but they keep making regrowths that if any amount, like if you, and I don't know where you're getting the kind of room to do this, but if you have Eternal Witness in your deck, or if you have Traverse, it's the interaction with Traverse is good, and who knows what else we might see people doing in that area, but the self mill is particularly relevant in Abzan. I think you're right.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Second turn Grim
Plus
Slayer.
the actual Planeswalker. The Planeswalker itself as a type.
Oh, that's a good point. Right?
The Planeswalker is a desirable type for Tarmogoyf in particular, but also to some degree Traverse. And that's not even counting if you get freaky and somehow like sneak an Emrakul in there or something.
Well, I wouldn't go that far. But if you're like turn 2 Grimflayer, turn 3 Liliana Last Hope, you could easily just be you could have like 2 Lingering Souls on turn 4. Like that's well within the realm of possibility with what's going on here, and I think that like that incidental card advantage is I think it's something that might add up over time. I just wanted to point that out in Remy's deck, but Jeremy Desani's deck and also Raph Levy. When you talk about being thick on 3s, these guys had, in addition to 4 copies of Liliana the Veil at the 3, 4 copies, main deck Blood Moon. What? In Jund? Isn't this like the trademark deck that Blood Moon was made to mess up?
Nah. It's often effective against them. But like Jund is all about like just like why would anybody be able to do anything? Like it's just like I don't know. I think Blood Moon is also just such a messed up card where it's like it's the sort of thing that sometimes you just play Blood Moon even though like annihilates almost all of your cards because you're banking on it being even worse for your opponent.
It gets them worse.
Because you can also just control when you play Blood Moon or not. And so like sometimes you just don't play it because you're like, well, I could never beat a Blood Moon, so I'm not going to play it.
It's interesting here, though, because you can put yourself in a spot where like, I guess this turns off their Inkmoth Nexus and their Pendelhaven. And he's got 4 swamps and a forest and a mountain, which wouldn't matter because all of his lands are going to be mountains in a minute, right?
Yep.
But I thought that was an interesting development in Jund Technologies.
Yeah, but none of them top 8'd, right?
No, none of these guys top 8'd. No.
Yeah, the only Jund deck, Jiri Abraz, his Jund deck, nothing too out of the ordinary at all. Just, he does have 1 Grim Lavamancer, 2 Kalitas. Kalitas is pretty industry standard everywhere these days. But 2 Tireless Tracker in the sideboard is kind of interesting. 1 Languish in the sideboard. But quite a diverse mix of sweepers. 1 sideboard Jund Charm, 1 sideboard Kozilek's Return, 1 sideboard Anger of the Gods, 1 sideboard Languish. Quite a mixture.
Jund Charm is so flexible. If it were up to, if I were going to go this direction, I think I would lean harder on Kozilek's Returns than on some of the other ones. Just because I think that the colorlessness is really good in situations like when you're playing against Affinity and sometimes when you're playing against Merfolk. And both of those decks have draws that are really good against Jund.
Yep. Yeah, I generally like having at least 2 Kozilek's Returns in decks like this. I am sympathetic to the desire for, like, Anger of the Gods. He wants the utility against the Dredge decks that have been so popular recently. Languish, to me, is
0 Dredge and 24 tries for top 8s. Is that right?
Yep, that's correct.
So officially not the Icarol, right?
Languish is the one that, by the way, I would cut. I could see replacing the Languish with a second Kozilek's Return personally. Over in I think this was not the weekend for Dredge. People had too many sites on it, and there was just Rest in Peace, Snile Spellbomb, Scavenging Ooze. There's just hate everywhere. What do you think of Keita Kawasaki's Jund deck? He still has the 4 Grim Flayers that that have been gaining popularity in the U.S. Nothing too out of the ordinary here. This is basically just SCG Open Jund.
I love the Grim Flayers personally. I think that they just do so much. First of all, I love the card. I loved it when it first started seeing play in Standard for Black Green Delirium, and then it's obviously so out of favor for Black Green Delirium in Standard now because all the Black Green Delirium and Black Green Delirium variants like Jund and Standard are all sweeper decks now, right? But I think that it does so much work in Jund for a couple reasons. In Modern, the turns are so constricted. I'm sorry, so compressed, not constricted. Like, a lot of stuff is going on. And just having another drop that's significant in terms of its impact so early in the game that it's like a little bit of a Tarmogoyf. Right? It's never as big as a Tarmogoyf, but it's a little bit of a Tarmogoyf. It gets to be 4/4, which is big enough to really, really put the hurt on Naya Burn and decks like that. But it's also a little bit of Dark Confidant, right? It doesn't give you the actual card advantage of Dark Confidant, but it gives you some selection. It's doing a lot of these things, so it's playing redundancy on both of your key 2-drops. At the same time, it's fixing your draws, which is great. It sets up stuff like Kolaghan's Command. I think that it sets up a little bit of help with Scavenging Ooze, sets up a little bit of help with Tarmogoyf. I think I really like it. I think it's very, very strong, and if I were to play Jund, I would probably play a variation that had Grim Player. Or Abzan for that matter.
Did you check out the Grixis Delver list that Albertus Law won his Grand Prix with?
Of course. How could I not check it out?
Dude, what do you think of this one? I mean, I know that Counter Squall has got to make you smile.
Well, of course. The only thing that I didn't like about it was the number of Counter Squalls that were played.
Dude, I'm talking about like a Counter Squall main deck. You want multiple Counter Squalls main deck?
I don't know. I love Counter Squall.
Dude, Counter Squall main deck is like already pretty aggressive.
So, I mean, I don't know how I feel about all of these individual choices, right? So, he only has 19 lands, right? So, step back for a second. This deck has 19 lands, but it has so much stuff going on. It has so much stuff going on from the creature side, right? It's like 3 Young Pyromancers, but also 3 Tazigurs and a Gurmag Angler. Like, this is like a little, I'm not sure, like, what direction do we really want to go? That's the question that I have on there. I'm not a huge fan of the Dreadbore. Like, I feel like I want more flexibility with, I don't know, maybe is Dreadbore like a really flexible card? Am I looking at it wrong? Because the thing is that this deck only has 19 lands, and even though the printed casting cost on a lot of these cards is very, very low, and the effective casting cost on some of the cards, for example, Tazigur is really low. Like, it's not, you try not to pay the retail on it. This deck needs to do multiple things per turn. I don't know. Obviously, he did great with it. It's just, what do you think?
I mean, it's hard to really ever disparage a Grixis deck. Right? Like, I mean, we're talking about Grixis. But not Naya. Not a zoo deck.
Yeah, I know.
Not Jund, but Grixis.
I know.
We're talking about Grixis.
It's
the thing is, though, that I
still like coming home, right? Like, no matter what.
But the home where I come from, I would generally play more than 19 lands. Part of it is that when you play 19 lands, and one is a mountain, and one is a swamp, and one is a blood crypt. You're talking about 16 blue sources. So it's not like the cantrips are even like a locked-in thing to be able to do. And that's not even counting the fact that if you draw the one Sulfur Falls, you're a little slow out the gate. And it's fine. It's 19 is still, you can do it. I just like these decks more when they have just slightly more mana. But maybe that's just not the way you have to do it right now. I do like 3 Gitaxian Probe, by the way.
Really?
I think people just play 4 of Gitaxian Probe just all too often. Gitaxian Probe is so much more a victim of diminishing returns than people realize. Like, the information is part of what you're paying for. And More so with Gitaxian Probe, though. The opportunity cost of Gitaxian probing the second time is higher than the first. Right? Like, going to the absurd extreme, obviously the 10th Gitaxian probe you draw is, like, worse than the 9th.
Well,
right?
The 10th one might kill you.
So every amount of Gitaxian probe you draw is more likely to kill you because each previous Gitaxian probe brought your life total down, making each point of damage a higher percentage of what you had left. And when you draw multiple Gitaxian probes, it's not just that. I mean, it can be great, and I think it's right to play 4 a lot of the time. I just think that there are decks, there are situations where you really can't afford to draw 2 Gitaxian probes. It's just so brutal how much it slows you down without progressing your game plan enough. And I don't know that it's right here. I don't. I mean, in the dark, I would assume that 4 is 4 and 0 are the most correct right numbers. But I just think that 3 is a good number for a deck that it's into Gitaxian probing, but it's not overly committed to it. And this deck in particular, I mean, Seer Visions, I think, is just so much better than the other cantrips in general for a deck like this. And then Thought Scour is actually better than Gitaxian Probe in a lot of circumstances because of how well it interacts with Tasigur and Gurmag Angler. And to a degree, Delver of Secrets. But also part of it, and this is a very important part, it's nice to be able to hold mana open for Mana Leak or Counter Squall or whatever, right? And Snapcaster Mage. And to be able to, if you don't Snapcaster Spell Snare something, instead you go Snapcaster Mage Thought Scour yourself and keep progressing your game plan. And you can't do that with Gitaxian Probe. You don't really want to tap out in your main phase and play your Snapcaster in your main phase to draw a card. So I think that if you decided 11 cantrips is the right number here, that I like shaving the Gitaxian Probe in this list.
What do you think about 75 cards, no Thoughtseize, no Inquisition to Kozilek? 0 and 0. That's a puzzler to me.
Nah, it's totally fine. That's not even that weird. So the Grixis deck, the key, and don't get me wrong, obviously it's more common that you would play some number of those.
Number of those 8 cards, yeah.
Yeah, but it's actually really bad to play
or even Duress, right?
No. So it's actually really bad to play Thoughtseize and Inquisition alongside Young Pyromancer and Delver of Secrets. They push the wrong ways. You can't afford the tempo negative aspect of Thoughtseize and Inquisition. You need all that stuff. Every bit of that stuff you're going to be doing, you want that stuff to be counter magic. You want to play Thoughtseize, or you want to play Counter Squall, Spell Pierce, Spell Snare, Mana Leak, Remand, something, Flash Freeze, Dispel, anything, whatever it takes. Anything that you are going to play in that disruption area, you need it to be set up so that you can make some mana on it instead of lose mana, and you need your opponent's turn to be countered by your turn so that your thing like Delver hits again or your thing like Young Pyromancer makes progress. If you're playing a Thoughtseize Inquisition game, you're going to run out of cards, and then your Young Pyromancer is not going to have enough fuel. And you don't want to play an attrition-y game. It's just really about wanting to compress the mana. And often a deck like this might have a couple Thoughtseizes in the board or something, but I don't like it. I frequently play Grixis at major tournaments with no discard in the sideboard.
None in the main deck, none in the sideboard.
None. It's fine. I think that it's a crutch.
You did.
I just think that it's a crutch people use. Now, I think it's right to play often, but I think there are people who automatically put it in because they think that's just what you're supposed to do, and you don't need to.
So you use some words that I think I understand, but I would guess that a lot of the listeners would get some help from a specificity standpoint. You said about the tempo negative aspects of some of the hand destruction. So can you explain how using cards like Thoughtseize and Inquisition might be tempo negative, but using cards like Spell Pierce wouldn't be? To a lot of folks, they're like, oh, I'm trading a 1-mana card for a multiple mana card. Isn't this always productive for me?
So the key is that when you Inquisition your opponent, you spent 1 mana and your opponent didn't spend any. So you actually are down 1 mana Now, Inquisition of Kozilek is a very powerful card, even though it's down 1 mana, because it gives you information about their hand, and it gives you incredible selection with regards to what you're trading 1-for-1 with. You're getting they're getting 1 mana the better of you, but you have knowledge of their whole hand, and you get to take the best thing that they have. And obviously, sometimes you're going to be stuck in a scenario where you don't get anything, but that's going to be true for a lot of counterspells too. I mean, sometimes they could just pay for a Spell Pierce. But when you do Spell Pierce a card, like say you Spell Pierce a Terminate, you spent 1 mana and your opponent spent 2 because they cast Terminate. So they lost a card and you lost a card, but you're up a mana. Plus, you have some amount of selection in that you chose what to counter. And just as Inquisition can be like, a brick later in the game sometimes when your opponent doesn't have any cards in hand. Spell Pierce could be too. But there are also going to be times where sometimes when you Spell Pierce, it's still okay. Or if your opponent plays around Spell Pierce, it's still okay because they're spending so much mana. And in general, though, it's really just about the fact that when you cast Spell Pierce or you cast Spell Snare or you cast Mana Leak, you're spending 1 or 2 mana to counter a spell that costs some amount of mana. And it doesn't mean you necessarily even need to get ahead. It's just that you really, really, really can't afford to fall behind in a deck with Delver of Secrets. Or, that's just not what you want to be doing here. That's the tempo negative. It's a deep and nuanced subject, but the short version is mana, speed. And when you unsummon a creature, you're gaining tempo, it's said, generally, because you are spending 1 mana to waste several mana from your opponent. Now you're down a card, but at least you gained a bunch of mana.
Unless you're unsummoning a card like a Call the Herd token or something, right?
Right. If you unsummon a token, then it's not even coming back, and now you're not just ahead on mana; you're also even on cards. And if you unsummon something that has a bunch of enchantments on it, now you're starting to get way ahead on both mana and cards. So these situations, there's a lot of different ways that you can interact with mana, and one of them has to do with just how much mana are you spending to neutralize your opponent's whatever he or she spent mana on, and there are decks that do power. So there are some Grixis decks that would do something very powerful, where they just want to make sure that they can survive long enough, and they want to make sure that they get the choicest threats. And if they fall behind a little bit on tempo, well, they can clean up the mess with like a Damnation or an Anger of the Gods or something else of that space. This deck doesn't want to fall behind. It doesn't have the ability to catch up very easily. The only cards it has that can really regain tempo are some of its removal spells can get you slightly ahead, but there's a real limit to how much that's even going to work in Modern. And then Gurmag Angler and Tassiger can usually outclass things on a mana per mana basis, but not by like an overwhelming amount. And often they get neutralized again by something like a Murderous Cut or a Dismember or a Path to Exile. So this is a deck that it is crucial to not fall behind, and I think that's why you see so much less incentive to play Thoughtseize or Inquisition in this style of Grixis. The Delver is the secret.
So, you mentioned Murderous Cut. I just think it's so interesting. This deck has a Murderous Cut, a Gurmag Angler, and 3 Tassigers. The evolution of Modern since the banning of Treasure Cruise et al. I think is it's interesting that basically all the key delve spells still found homes, and in fact, I would make the argument that Become Immense is the most important of all of them, right?
I don't know. It's very important, but I mean, Tassiger still shows up more, right?
Well, I mean, Become Immense it's
more novel.
It's the shoulder that Suicide Zoo cries on, and it's also a key spell in Infect.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely they're both super, super important, and it's the thing is though that it's not like the Suicide Zoo deck never plays any amount of that stuff, and most of the time they don't. Now they just play Become Immense instead of any of the black delve cards, but it's a metagame. That's true. That's true.
Mandrills is their Grimag Angler.
I just think that Become Immense gets a slightly disproportionate amount of spotlight for its power level simply because it has no real peers, whereas Mandrills, Tassiger, and Angler are all competing with each other.
Yep, that's true. They're all kind of the same card. 1 mana for a bigger than 1 mana thing.
So moving on to actually, there's a super, super cool deck in the top 8, that same top 8. And I apologize on the name pronunciation, but Jiahao? Jiahao. I'm sorry, my apologies. His burn deck, you would like.
Yeah.
Nothing cool about it. It's actually one below. The Pyromancer Ascension deck played by Tamada.
Oh, so the Pyromancer Ascension deck is also a deck that I think we should cover. It has a bunch of new things, I think, at least for this archetype or at least for this format, that are just crazy. Number one, Thing in the Ice taking. Is it fair to say it takes the place of Goblin Electromancer? It's like the only creature in the deck.
Yeah, Thing of the Ice is definitely replacing the Electromancer here as the one-off creature. Instead of like speeding you up, the idea is that it's a little bit of a backup plan in and of itself, you know?
Oh, and it's super powerful, right? Like, especially in a format like Modern, where everybody's creatures are the kind of thing that you're only paying 1 or 2 or 3 mana for. It's actually big enough to hold those things back, and then when it flips over, it's the biggest thing on the table. Well, it's often the only thing on the table, right?
Yeah, it's generally going to be the only thing left. I think it's actually just really key for breaking up some of the fast aggro / combo sort of things that go on in Modern. If you look at it, Suicide Zoo, when they can't really shove all in when, like with Become Immense and Temur Battle Rage and all that. If you've got a Thing in the Ice and you can just flip it and boom, undo all their work. Or alternatively, you're playing against Affinity. Sometimes Thing in the Ice bouncing everything that buys you. That's a Hurkyl's Recall right there.
Yeah.
And then sometimes Thing in the Ice, you're playing against Infect and they can't go all in because you'll just Thing in the Ice. So it's very exciting in a world with less removal, which a lot of and this is a recurring theme we're seeing this weekend. A lot of people benefited who took a gamble that removal was going to be at a slightly lower level.
So what about Visions of Beyond? That's a card that, like, we haven't seen this in Modern Pyromancer Ascension decks before. It's a powerful card, right?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen it once in a while, but certainly not very often or recently. And typically when we see it, we don't even see it as a 4 of. It's sort of this. The most common place we would see it actually is in a different sort of ascension, in Jeskai Ascendancy. Like with Jeskai Ascendancy, it occasionally would get used as a Treasure Cruise replacement. But to use an actual Pyromancer's Ascension, that's where, I mean, obviously you would use 4 of it here just because, like, the nature of Pyromancer's Ascension, you want to have all duplicates if you can. But I think the Visions of the Beyond, the most common place we've seen is a Jeskai Ascendancy deck. So to see it here, it's definitely very, very cool.
So the question I have is, 18-land combo deck, Modern format, is it really worth it to go with the one Hollowed Fountain for 4 Lightning Helixes?
Well, and it's important, the 3 Rest for the Weary in the sideboard. Rest for the Weary is a very underrated sideboard card. The fact that for 2 mana you can gain 8 life, that's just so backbreaking for a Lava Spike deck.
I mean, that might be game over, actually.
Yeah, and that's not even counting the fact that Rest for the Weary is forked by Pyromancer's Ascension. That's just ridiculous. And it's not that you have to main phase it to be able to pull off the landfall part. You can fetch it up. Sometimes you just fetch. Your opponent goes, okay, shove, boom, boom. They do their whole thing. And they try to kill you. And then you fetch up a land in response, Rest for the Weary, and gain a net of 7 life. Then untap and start doing good stuff. I think Rest for the Weary is just it's a great card.
So you think the technology here is very, very powerful, huh?
I like it. I think the combination of 4 Lightning Helix in the main and 3 Rest for the Weary in the board is just so. I don't think you can play. I just don't think it's playable without a bunch of life gain. I think you have to be able to compete with the burn decks. There's just too many of them. They're too good to not be interacting with some amount of life gain. And I think this is a real smart way to do it.
Path to Exile, also a nice flexible addition.
We've talked.
Red version.
Yeah, we've talked about how important Path is right now, just because the number of decks that try to shove with Become Immense, they end up with creatures that are just enormous and going to kill you in one hit, and often for very little amounts of mana. So the ability to be able to defend yourself for just 1 mana, no matter how big the creature is an incredible angle. If anything, I would consider playing a 3rd one.
Oh, I agree. I think that maybe even a 4th one.
Yeah, I think Path to Exile is a absolutely excellent card right now. Excellent card. Check out Kentaro Yamamoto's Goryo's Vengeance deck. I know you looked at this one earlier, but the very, very strong player playing a Grixis sort of combo deck, the Grizzlebrand Emrakul stuff, but he does not use Jace Vryn's Prodigy. Instead, and this is kind of cool, his new discard outlet to kind of make up for, because you need to have like a critical mass of ways to discard Grizzlebrand or Emrakul. And obviously everybody uses Faithless Looting because it's just cheap and powerful, and they use Izzet Charm because it's versatile and still relatively efficient. But here, instead of using Jace Vryn's Prodigy as his extra discard outlet, which can just die a bunch, he's using Collective Brutality, a card we've been seeing showing up all over the place. Like, it's already put up numbers in Dredge, it's put up numbers in Jund, it's put up numbers in Abzan, and here we see Collective Brutality showing up in Goryo's Vengeance, where you can use it not only as a duress to clear the path, but also a way to discard Emrakul that same turn, or Grizzlebrand that same turn. And the cool part is that Collective Brutality lets you discard a card or 2 cards as part of a cost. So even if your opponent counters the Collective Brutality, you still got to discard the Emrakul. Or not Emrakul, in this case, that doesn't help as much. But if you discard the Grizzlebrand, you get to discard the Grizzlebrand to your Collective Brutality. And you were just going to take the 1 mana leak they had anyway. But if they mana leak your Collective Brutality, when you just have 2 land open, you can just be like, okay, I guess it's countered, and now your mana's tapped. And also my Grizzlebrand is in the graveyard, and I'll use my last 2 mana to Goryo's Vengeance. Boom, Grizzlebrand.
Yeah, I think that Collective Brutality is just so important in terms of new additions to Modern. I mean, it's cool here, right? Because anytime that you have a card like this that has a limitation, right, and that you can turn that limitation into an asset, this is an archetype that actually thrives on getting its creatures in the graveyard. But the Collective Brutality also in Abzan, for example, where it's a discard outlet for Lingering Souls, things like that. I think this card is probably going to just rise and rise in popularity. It's so cool for the format. I mean,
so far, ever since it's been legal, it's been showing up in a new deck every single week.
Oh yeah,
it's everywhere. I mean, this card is just going to be a staple forever. This is a Modern staple now, and it's cool that you this is in every part of the Buffalo type of situation here, because like the extra 2 life. That sometimes matters, because when you're at 7 and you gain 2, now you can Grizzlebrand 1 more time.
Yeah, I think that the 2 life is just like, it's like the killer app on Collective Brutality. So cool.
Yeah, and the extra 2 damage matters as well. It really does, because we're talking about a deck that has Emrakul and Lightning Bolt. Like, sometimes you hit your opponent with Emrakul, they lose everything, and now they're at 5. And if you just have a Lightning Bolt to Collective Brutality, you win.
Yeah, here we go.
Or if your opponent fetched 1 time and you hit them with Emrakul, they're just at 2. Because they just went fetch, shockland, and now you Emrakul them and they're at 2. It's nice to be able to finish them off instead of just hang out for 10 turns. And the ability to do all three modes, it comes up. It does matter because there's times where you're just like, okay, I'm playing against Affinity. I'm gonna kill their creature, the only creature that could wear the plating, or I'm gonna kill their Ravager, and then I'm also gonna take the plating out of their hand, or take the Shrapnel Blast, or whatever it is. And I'm also just gonna drain them just because I've got this extra copy. It's not like I need these 2 Griselbrands in my hand. And in the sideboard, what do you think of the 2 Quicksilver Amulets? That's kind of a new one, right? You don't see that one every day.
Nope. I mean, you got to get around. You got to get around to other people's sideboard cards, right? Like, when you are playing a deck that is predicated on graveyard, when Dredge is going to be one of the most shot at splash damage archetypes, we talked about it. There were 0 Dredge out of 24 possible top 8 slots this weekend.
Yep.
You got to have something, right? Like, because I don't think that this deck is very apt to be playing fair, right?
No, this deck is definitely not even in the zip code of being able to play a fair game. Like, you're not even close to being able to transform into a fair game. You just don't have any tools for doing that.
You got to do something.
Yeah, right. You have to do something, so it's a different unfair strategy. It's like people who play Elf Combo in Legacy and then transform into Natural Order. Sometimes you just move from one unfair deck to a different unfair deck. That's like a common...
It's a different unfair deck that they're not shooting at right now. That's the thing.
Right. Speaking of unfair decks, and specifically Through the Breach, because this is a Through the Breach deck, there's the much more popular and, for this past weekend, successful Through the Breach deck, Green-Red. Like more Through the Breach with Primeval Titan. Coming in second, third, both second and third in the American GP, and then also putting up another top 8 over in Europe. The primary thing you're doing here is you're just Through the Breach with Primeval Titan, which is kind of exciting. It's kind of interesting. It's funny because you think, oh, Through the Breach is 5. Is it really such a big deal? Like, why are you Through the Breaching? Why do you care so much when Primeval Titan only costs 6 anyway? But Through the Breach is a very different animal when you have Primeval Titan because
it's mad card advantage, right?
Right. So when you go ahead.
Yeah. So you think of Through the Breach as like, oh, I'm casting a card out of my hand, and then I'm going to lose the creature. Like, I think that's the thought process that a lot of folks have when they're considering a card like this. That's technically true, right? It's technically the case that you're going to use 2 cards and they're both going to go to the graveyard. Neither one of them are going to be, in your assets after you're done with Through the Breach. But that's not the only thing that happened, right? You cast Through the Breach, you get 2 lands because Primeval Titan entered the battlefield, right? Then when he attacks, you get 2 more lands, right? So you got 2 explosive vegetations for a pretty reasonable amount of mana. And
6 damage.
Yeah, you got to hit him.
And it's better than explosive vegetation, though, because you get to search up any lands you want. And specifically, you get to go get your first Primeval Titan, you might go get 2 Valakut the Molten Pinnacles. And then your next, when you attack, go get 2 Mountains and dome your opponent for 12. And that's 18 damage counting the Primeval Titan.
Well, then any mountain you get for the rest of the game is probably just going to ting them again and again, and you might just cast a Primeval Titan next turn.
Right.
Or have another Through the Breach for
exactly.
Or to have a Summoner pack. Any of those things.
Absolutely.
I think this deck is cool. I'm looking at Rob Pisano's deck. I don't know which one you wanted to focus on. But I like it because it has Nahiri the Harbinger, where it's kind of like a nudge, nudge, wink, wink, right? He's got a Sacred Foundry, which he can find with Farseek. And so, that it's a very... You go through the process of kind of leveling up to get to a big creature like you would elsewise. Plus, it's a flexible removal and defensive ability on that. And then he's also got Oath of Nissa, which I think is a really interesting choice for a deck that has 25 lands and a bunch of acceleration cards.
I like the Oath of Nissas in this deck, and I mean, most of the other green-red through the breach decks are playing it too, and for good reason. Part of it is the Oath of Nissa. Like, this is a deck that could it's not uncommon to see Scape Shift decks with 28 land. And this isn't much of a Scape Shift deck. I mean, most of them don't play any, and some of them play one. But like a Scape Shift deck, this is a deck that wants to have tons and tons and tons of land. And being able to replace a few of your land with Oath of Nissas so that you just draw Primeval Titan slightly more often. Because this is just a deck in which this deck is truly 56 cards for Primeval Titan. You know, it's just 4 Primeval Titans and 56 cards that make Primeval Titan broken.
So, I think that's interesting because replacing 3 lands with Oath of Nissa does functionally make it easier for you to draw your key creature. But it also becomes Primeval Titan late in the game, right? Like, you draw Oath of Nissa and you play it, and then it just turns over Primeval Titan sometimes.
And there's little applications. There's little cute stuff you can do depending on your build. I mean, Rob isn't playing any. But the people who play Courser of Crufix, you know, like for instance, Mike Bolingues over in Europe finished 5th with green-red through the breach, 4 Oath of Nissas. And his Oath of Nissas are really kind of cool because they work with his Courser of Crufix as well, just giving you a free reset. That's cute, right?
Well, it's also cool because I thought, like, is Dromica's Command any kind of a factor in Modern? If it is, Oath of Nissa actually protects his coursers a little bit. It's not 0.
I don't think it's going to show up too much. It's non-zero, but not very much at all. But yeah, it's that's definitely a cool application in Standard. I think Oath of Nissa in this spot, one of the other cool things that's kind of an option to consider is just when you are doing all of this ripping through your deck, so to speak, it smooths out the variance in a certain way because we're talking about like Mike's deck has just 12 creatures. It's very easy for his draws to he can have a lot of air for a long time.
Yes.
And if he Oath of Nissas and it's 3 more cards, like it's just 3 land, well, that isn't a creature itself. He wasn't going to get any creatures for the next several turns. Like, he's making progress. Like, that matters. That it's his deck is functionally 3 cards smaller for the purposes of what he would need to, like his odds of drawing Primeval Titan every turn are higher now.
Yeah, I think that's an underrated aspect of these kinds of selection cards because it's not the case that he really just whiffed. Like, when it's happening to you, right? You play your Oath of Nissa, you're like, oh man, I whiffed, just flipped over a bunch of lands or like some irrelevant creature like Sakura the Tribe Elder or something like that. That's true, but that also means that if you're just ripping off the top of your deck, you weren't going to get your key card either, but now you're closer.
Yep. And this isn't an illusion there's a classic illusion that a lot of players are familiar with, where it's the whole idea that like getting milled being a bad thing because it's like, who cares? That you weren't going to get that card anyway. Like, it's not like the card mattered because it could have just been the card that was on the bottom of your deck. This is not that same phenomenon. This is something very different. You only before you cast Oath of Nissa, you have whatever the odds are of drawing a Primeval Titan every turn of the game. When you cast Oath of Nissa, one of 2 things is necessarily true. Either it draws you a Primeval Titan right now, which is like the best of all possible worlds, or it increases your chances of drawing a Primeval Titan by much more than just a cantrip would. Like, in terms of, like, if you just draw a card and it's not Primeval Titan, your odds of drawing Primeval Titan each of the following turns are not increased by as much as Oath of Nissa does. Just because Oath of Nissa is showing you 3 more cards that are either Primeval Titan or get you that much closer to all your Primeval Titans.
Yep. I actually had a different Titan I wanted to touch base on. If you want to
Sure.
take a look at it, the 19th place deck from Indy, Brian Cooper's Azorius Control. I don't know how you feel about this archetype, but this actually I kind of love this deck. We were talking, I don't remember if it was last week or the week before, about a flash-based blue-white deck. This is the opposite of a flash-based blue-white deck in Modern. So this deck Brian's got 5 Planeswalkers. He's got 2 Jace Beleren, 2 Gideon Ally of Zendikar, and 1 Elspeth Suns Champion. This is a format where we have to actually say which version of Jace, Gideon, or Elspeth playing, because there's so many available. And then he's got 2 Kitchen Finks, 3 Snapcaster Mages, and 2 Sun Titans. So not Primeval Titan, Sun Titan. And his sorceries are 3 Sunlance. That's what was it? The red version called? Strafe. It's the white Strafe, right? 3 Supreme Verdicts, and then 4 Ancestral Vision. He's got some counters. He's got Negate, Mana Leak, Path to Exile, Spell Snare, and 3 Cryptic Commands, 1 Detention Sphere, 25 lands. What do you think about this deck? It is 61, however, so I know this breaks every rule of your propriety.
No, I don't know about all that. But, it's fine. This is a deck that just keeps popping up. It comes up. It's like it gets into fashion on Mitgo about once every 4 months, once every 6 months. It'll just be it'll be the thing where like it'll have like a small but reasonably devoted following for like a month. I've never really been that big into these Sun Titan blue-white decks, but the fact that they all they show up for years, they pop back up once in a while. There's got to be something to it, and it's fine cards. There's fine cards involved, but it's not the style that I would go with for me. I think it's a little bit more your style in terms of the way that it's going to just bury people with card advantage later, the amount that it's going to overpower people on an axis that they're not commonly attacked on. It's got some clever things going on. I'm kind of lame. I'm just a sucker for the delve cards. Or if I was going to play blue white, I'd want to play Spell Quell or Flash. Be very very focused on the Flash aspect.
Yeah, I mean, I love the Flash deck too, but the thing that I like about this is that it actually does so many different things. Like, sometimes you're just a Sun Titan Ghost Quarter deck, right? Like, 4 Ghost Quarters, you are going to mess up Suicide Zoo.
And I think Ghost Quarter is just excellent in this format right now anyway. The ability to disrupt things like Valakut the Molten Pinnacle or Inkmoth Nexus.
I am perfectly happy Ghost Quartering in Eldrazi Temple.
For sure.
Go crazy.
I do think that this is a deck that really rewards a player who's familiar with it, and I think that's part of the reason why you see some of the same people bring it back once every in a while. If you are very proficient with this deck and you know the patterns and the routines, most of your opponents are not, and this is a deck that has both a lot of play to it and a lot of play against it. And it's going to make life hard for a lot of people. And if you know the paths that lead your opponents down, there's a lot of really. I mean, this is a deck for somebody who wants to play a legit real game of Magic. Modern be damned.
I like it because a lot of the time you're going to have Jace Beleren, and your opponent's going to have to work so hard to try to eliminate Jace Beleren. And this deck, I mean, your Jace is like unkillable. That's the thing. Sun Titan just keeps bringing him back. And I think it's just oppressive. Like, this deck, I don't think this deck can be nickel and dimed. Like, if you think people are going to play, like, a lot of Jund, like, don't let anybody do anything, let's one-for-one people a lot, and have, like, an incidental card advantage engine, no, sir. This one's going over the top of that strategy.
So now how do you like that blue-white one versus, like, for instance, the blue-white control deck played by Daniel Bolliston over in Europe? His blue-white control deck, it wasn't really a flash deck. Like he doesn't have any spell quellers or anything. His only flash aspect is 2 Restoration Angel and 2 Vendilion Click and the usual Snapcaster Mage. But this is a deck with 2 Kitchen Finks, 3 Wall of Omens, and then a Gideon, and then the aforementioned flash creatures. His big advantage, I mean, as always, he's like everybody else, he's winning with Celestial Colonnade. But like as always, or not as always, but his twist, this is a deck that is getting a lot of its advantage from 3 Ancestral Visions, 3 Supreme Verdicts, and 3 Cryptic Commands. And then just to kind of mix it up a little bit, we're seeing multiple negates main deck alongside Mana Leak and Spell Snare and Cryptic Command. And then also for removal, in addition to Detention Sphere, he's got 1 Blessed Alliance and 1 Condemn.
I think this deck seems a little erratic. I would really like Spell Queller in a strategy like this. I think Spell Queller would go a long way. I mean, obviously, you just draw Wall of Omens and Kitchen Finks, and you can really put the hurt on just turn 2, turn 3, and then, God forbid, you have your Restoration Angel. You just have, 3 things, each of which was essentially card advantageous, each of them probably better than whatever your opponent tried to do for each of those turns, and you're going to look really good. But I think this deck has, a really, really bad problem of potentially drawing the wrong half of the deck. Look at it, right? It's just there are going to be opponents where it's going to be a liability to draw Ancestral Vision and Supreme Verdict, and he's got 3 of each of those in his main deck. What I would like to see that he's a little thin on is Timely Reinforcements. He's only got 1. I think that's one of the best catch-up cards that you can play in the format. And I don't know. I'm not super hip to this one.
Yeah, to me, it's just a less pure blue-white flash deck. So, were there any of the other decks from Indy that really caught your eye?
Just one. I wanted to contrast 2 different Abzan decks that didn't make the top 8. I was thinking about Paulo Vitor Damadurosa's deck, which is I think a top 16 or top 32 deck, and Ben Stark's deck. Both of them played Abzan. I like Paulo's because he played Collective Brutality, and I thought that Collective Brutality was just a great enabler for Lingering Souls. And he only played 2 Siege Rhinos, with 3 Grim Players, but Ben played no Siege Rhinos. And I was just like, well, that seemed odd to me. I think if you're going to go the Abzan route, isn't Siege Rhino that's where you want to land ultimately?
I don't know. I think it's totally fine playing less than 4.
But all the way to 0?
Yeah. Any number less than 4, because it's not it doesn't matter how many individually. It's not like they're key cards. It's just how do the different pieces lock together and fit. To me, the bigger question is really, are you just going to be able to survive against the amount of burn that people play?
So, Paulo has traversed the Uvenwald into a Shriek Maw, which I think is super cool. I think that's a really neat little interaction. I think if you're going to play a Grim Player Traverse the Uvenwald deck, then playing 2 Siege Rhinos fine. You might just draw them both every game. That's a possible thing that will happen. But just the only thing that's just, this is getting me a little bit, is that if I'm not going to end up being a Siege Rhino deck, and I'm Abzan, okay, get it, I'm signed up for all these things. At what point does it make sense for me to be a Dark Confidant deck again? That's the only thing I'd be thinking about.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, I think that there's a lot of different ways to do it. I think that it depends on how much burn you expect, how aggressive you expect the format to be. I kind of am a little bit worried about just the amount of red aggro and Death Shadow and stuff. I don't know that I think it's how much I want to embrace that yet, but I do wonder though. What do you think about the green white hate bears deck that one of the many Brandons in the top 8 of GP Indy played?
Give me 1 second.
This is the one with Blade Splicer and Restoration Angel. Not an altogether uncommon combo, but then he's got Thalia, lots of just the usual hate bear selection, and notably no Thalia heretical, heretic Cathar. That's something that people have started playing a little bit of, but he's kicking it kind of old school and just playing a much more traditional green white hate bears deck. Although notably, he does have a Gisela the Broken Blade in his sideboard.
So this deck is like 30 creatures, 4 Path to Exile, 4 Aether Vial, end, right? It's just 22 lands off after that. I don't know. I feel like I would want this deck to go further than it does. You know what I mean? Is that like a clearly communicated idea? Like, I feel like it's just
how much further? I mean, what do you want him to do?
75% of the way there.
I mean, what do you want him to do? Move away from like Eternal Witness, like a little less grinding, even more hate.
Like, I want it to be like, if I'm going to play a deck like this, right? And I get it. I get wanting to play a deck like this sometimes. Like, I want to have like super focused things that I can draw that destroy individual opponents. The problem is that when you're too generalized in any direction in a format like Modern, you just get run over if you give them a chink in the armor. That's what I mean. I mean, like, why does this deck not find a way to play core? What's his name? Is it Core Firewalker?
Core Firewalker, yeah. Core Firewalker.
Why is there no Core Firewalker in the 75? Right? If a red deck can figure out how to play Core Firewalker, surely this deck should be able to figure out how to play Core Firewalker. This deck has a lot of cards that are effective and good, potentially, against a red aggro deck. But it's also got a lot of 3s, right? Like, Kitchen Fix is a good card. He only has 2. Blade Splicer is a good card sometimes, right? And Flicker Wisp is like, Eternal Witness, these guys all cost 3. Like, you just don't have time all the time against these kind of opponents. And the other
right, like you don't always have Aether Vial in play.
Yeah, like, if you have to play a fair game against one of the more common, highly successful archetypes, the only way that you're going to consistently be able to beat them is playing this kind of a strategy, is you slam your mana and you destroy them. The same way he has a card like Thalia Guardian of Thraben against combo that he can play against on turn 2 or spell-based control decks. Like, Thalia Guardian of Thraben is so good against, like, Grixis, right? Like, they can kill it, but it's really annoying for them. Their entire strategy is predicated on casting a cantrip that sets up their next card, right? So they at least have to take a turn off. Like, he's got Leonin Arbiter that messes up, actually, Leonin Arbiter is a pretty good example. You play that on turn 2, you could really, really, really mess up the next turn or two of a Suicide Zoo deck. He just might not be able to get the land that he wants the next turn. But, like, yeah, I don't know. I feel like it needs to go a little bit further. I feel like it has, like, 75% of the tools that I would want to see.
What do you think of Seraphin Wellinger's version from .4 over in Europe? He doesn't have Core Firewalker either. However, he does have Spellskite, which does a little bit of the work there. But a couple notable differences. He's got 2 Collected Companies in addition to his 4 Restoration Angels. And then he's also got 2 Selfless Spirits coming in out of the sideboard.
I like this deck more. I thought that, first of all, Collected Company Eternal Witness is just, I know he was like 1 copy of one and 2 copies of the other one. But I feel like if you ever pull that off, like, other guys or gal is just slumping in their chair. That's the thing that his deck can do. I think his ability to go up to multiple spell skites after sideboarding. The reason I love it is if the burn deck, probably a burn deck on the other side of the table, doesn't know that the spell skite is coming, just might not have the right cards to fight against the spell skite, even multiple copies, super annoying for them. It has 4 toughness. Like, a lot of these creatures are just like meat. You're like, all right, I guess it's a pretty good card, but it's like an 0-1 or a 3-1 or whatever. All these things get destroyed by Searings. Spell sites do not get destroyed by Searings.
And this is his version has the full 4 Scavenging Ooze, and then notably, and I know this is a part that is, this is a deck construction decision of his that I believe will speak to you. He's got 9 3-drops. That's so much more like realistic of a mana curve. Like, and Brandon's list is totally fine too, but the version over in the U.S., 2 Blades Placers and Eternal Witness is 3, 4 Flicker Wisp makes 7, 2 Kitchen Finks is 9. The 9 is, it's all still there, but it's not exactly streamlined. It's kind of just all over.
Well, the other thing is I like about Seraphin's deck is he goes a little further even on the things that Brandon still got. So he's got a 3rd Stony Silence. When you look at cards like Stony Silence and Rest in Peace, like when you play Hate Bears, and I mean I've played Hate Bears, right? Like you have to understand something about this. You are like the 15th most powerful guy in the room, okay? Like you go in,
if that.
You might be the 27th most powerful guy in the room. If you want to make top 8, if you want to win the tournament, you need a combination of really good aim and at least reasonably good matchups. Because everybody's more powerful than you. You can beat them, you have to have the right tools, which means that if you're going to play against another creature deck, for example, Affinity, and they play their A game and you play your A game, you are dead before you can even cast Restoration Angel like 40% of the time. You're dead. You never get the chance to set up because you have too many 3-drops in your hand. You didn't even draw this card. You didn't go first. Whatever the list of excuses is, you're dead like 40% of the time. You need to be able to slam a super hate card on them before they can kill you.
See, I would want to go the other way. I think that if you're going to play green-white, and I think you're right with the way these decks are constructed, but if you're going to play a lot of these cards, I would rather just get rid of most of the hate and play like a Coral Helm combo, like Kelvin Shu. Because, like, if you notice, these decks are deceptively similar. Path to Exile, Collected Company, the Noble Hierarch, and then a bunch of creatures, right? But instead of having Hate Bears, it's got extra mana because it's got both Birds of Paradise and Noble Hierarch.
And it could just kill you.
And then it's got a little bit more durability, things like Voice of Resurgence and Selfless Spirit. But the big thing is that Retreat to Coral Helm, in conjunction with Knight of the Reliquary, just gives you some oops, I win. And then the ability for Collected Company and Spellqueller to let you play just such a different sort of game, like a little bit more grinding and tempo oriented. Like you've got card advantage, and you've got like this tempo oriented. You've got this ability to play just sort of a weird proactive game that can keep people off balance. I think that it's a direction that speaks to me slightly more anyway.
So I
also just love the sideboard. Is it Staticaster? No, seriously, is it? No. Is it Staticaster plus Retreat to Coral Helm? You start putting in work.
So this is what I'd say about that. First of all, it had never occurred to me that these two decks were so structurally similar. But now that you mention it, they obviously are. But the thing is, I don't think that the kind of person who wants to play Coral Hell combo deck is the same kind of person who wants to play Hate Bears, like in their soul. Like you're talking about a format where you could play anything, right? Like you could play Kiki combo, you could play Affinity, you could play Bant Eldrazi, you could play, there are a lot of decks. I could spend the next 5 minutes and never go over the same deck, right? If you just want to play a zoo deck, right? There's now a spectrum of zoo decks. You could play a Naya zoo deck with Wild Nacatl. You could play Suicide Zoo with Death Shadow. You could play like one of these all-in Burning Tree zoo decks, which I think are really cool. This decks just play a whole bunch of spells and then get in with Bushwhackers. There's so many different kind of decks you can play. Somebody who's playing Coral Helm combo they're like, I think they're like near the zone of somebody who plays Scape Shift or.
See, I would play Scape Shift. I would play Coral Helm combo.
Yeah, like that.
I'm not trying to play Green-White Hate Bears.
You're like, I'm going to play a combo deck, but if my combo doesn't go off, I've still actually got a really, really good plan B. Like that's that zone, right? Like that's a different zone than somebody who's playing a limited damage, no plan B combo deck, like
no
Pyromancer.
No, I disagree. I think they're more similar than you realize. I think that Plan A, the combo, is you true the hate bear they can't beat, and then you get a free win, right? Like,
but you have no selection. That's not even a plan.
And I don't play those decks.
So I do play those decks.
Dude, I promise you, Blade Splicer is not. That's a Plan B at best.
I promise you. You tap out for a Blade Splicer against John Finkel, you don't get a fourth turn.
No.
You're dead.
No,
right?
No, but I'm just saying that, like, both of these decks have a mediocre beatdown plan. You're not impressing anybody with a 2-1 first strike for 2. This is a format with a bunch of 1-mana 3/3s. Like, this is not this format has 1-mana 4/5s and 5/5s and 13/13s.
I got to tell you, I don't even understand why people play Jund. Like, and I'm not even talking about from the Naya perspective. Jund is so popular. Have you ever seen one of these matches between Jund and Suicide Zoo? If Jund doesn't win the flip, I don't even know how they compete. Like, I just look over, the Suicide Zoo guy goes like, just takes their first turn, and then Thought seizes the Jund deck, and then the Jund deck is dead on the third turn. And I don't even know what they could do. They don't even have cards that can kill a 13/13 for in the amount of time they have to win the game if they get Thought seized.
Yeah, I mean, they basically got to rip. They have like 1, maybe 2 rips to terminate.
Yeah, and
right?
but if it's in their hand, it's gone. That's the problem.
Right.
Right? So, like, I just don't even understand how you play those decks, right? Like, and Suicide Zoo is a kind of unfair deck, right? It's not even unfair on the spectrum of unfair decks for Modern. It's just that deck also has a good Plan B. Its Plan B is like Wild Nacatl and Step Links.
Modern has moved into this weird place where, like, all the decks are, like, riding the line between mediocre beatdown and combo. Right? Like, Infect, mediocre beatdown, combo. Lava Spike with Wild Nacatl, mediocre beatdown,
pretty good
combo.
Pretty good beatdown.
No, it's not, because it's like it's not that good of a beatdown in terms of just pure beatdown, because it has so few creatures, and a bunch of its removal doesn't remove blockers.
True.
A bunch of its burn. Like, it's actually just like a mediocre beatdown deck as far as beatdown decks would go.
As a player of Naya,
Knight of the Reliquary, Affinity. Affinity is king of the mediocre beats. Let me just get in there with my Signal Pest powering up my Venom Knight or whatever.
Yeah, but when its beatdown is good, it's so good.
Yeah, I don't know, man. This Suicide Zoo, I mean, sometimes you just, I guess I'll just hang out with my my Step Links.
1/1 step, 0/1 Step Links.
0/1 Step Links.
It's happening.
All right,
they don't have any
Death
lands.
Shadow. My Death Shadow is finally a 1/1. Let's go. Let's party.
You're right. Well, I think there are some decks that are like still legitimate decks, like Merfolk. They have like a legitimate their own game plan. But I guess none of those decks make top 8.
And there just aren't as many of them percentage-wise. Like, there's just so many decks that sometimes play combo and sometimes play mediocre beatdown. It's weird. The format is so fast.
It's fun, though. I really like it.
I like how much crazy stuff you can do. It's definitely a format for somebody who is okay with just embracing the chaos. It's just there's craziness all over the place. You can't... you're going to have a real hard time if you just like are attached to the idea that you're just going to play like a normal game of Magic over and over again. That's just not really. That's not the format. That's not the format. The format is lots of crazy, weird stuff, and trying to just break stuff all over the place, and that can be very exciting, and it can be very wild, chaotic, dynamic, and I think we're going to continue to see a lot of crazy stuff in Modern all over the place, you know?
I agree. I think that the shakeups that we've had post, double Eldrazi lands has made for a much more diverse and interesting format. And I love the fact that there are so many different ways that you can initiate a mediocre beatdown. You can attack for 1. You can attack for 2. You can attack for 1 only because of exalted triggers. All kinds of things we can do.
All right, man. Well, I'm gonna get back to packing and
packing for paxing.
I'm gonna be packing for paxing. Direwolf's up there with all kinds of games. We're showcasing, doing a bunch of stuff with Eternal and Elder Scrolls Legends, and actually we've got our new board game that won some awards over at Gen Con, Clank, which is an actual brick and mortar game, like a real paper, like it's Direwolf paper. Direwolf paper, bringing you Clank.
So
plus obviously Magic Worlds, super pumped from Magic Worlds.
So go say hi to Patrick if you are up at PAX, or you can say hi to us in various places on the interwebs. We are Top Level Podcast, Facebook, Twitter, and Patreon. Also YouTube Top Level Podcast. We've been YouTubing for the past several weeks there as well. And just want to shout out to one of our patrons, Mohammed Al-Sabah. Thanks for supporting us, Mohammed.
Yeah, props, man. Much appreciated. Thank you, Mohammed.
Cool. All right. Have fun at PAX, Patrick. See you next week.
Worlds, let's do it.
In life didn't work so great. Tried to play dredge just for jail or hate. Ghostly prison waiting for my untapped phase. Your core trapped in amber stasis state. Lost a lot of friends, got left behind. Had to find a way not to lose my mind. Trapped in a vault with nothing but time. Parents and my friends were the key to find. Magic gave me purpose and drive. The game, the love, kept me alive. Visions of better weather, light inside.